You're seeing a lot of people right now as you travel,
Mhm.
and I'm wondering if there's anything unique you're hearing about people's despair at this particular moment for our culture, civilization, country.
I think the first thing we need to do, we're familiar with that word. Everybody has their own take on it, their own experience of it. So what's despair saying? Well, despair is saying everything is I'm a disaster. Life is a disaster. The husband has left me. My baby died. The house fell down. I haven't got a job. I'm homeless. Whatever the external condition might be that is triggered this feeling of despair. But then we can hear it's a hopeless voice. It's hopeless. Things are a disaster. The world looks terrible. Everything looks disaster. And then, of course, there's the main feeling of despair is you can't do anything about it. It's completely impossible. So when we know that, just theoretically, then what do we do with it? Well, we need to learn to do using these practical techniques is go beneath the feeling and not wait for the feeling to happen. This is the thing. We do a practice every day, then we're going to catch it and then grab it before it becomes such a strong feeling. But it's to hear what it's saying. So would you think that's true, that despair is really, if you put it down, if you write the words out, it's hopeless. Nothing's worthwhile. Everything's a disaster. I mean, what would you say? What would you think?
Yeah, yeah, it would be perceiving harmful events in the world and feeling like there's nothing I can do about it. Yeah, hopelessness.
Okay, so let's look at this. Let's look at the Buddhist analysis of this. The way we feel is driven by these thoughts in our mind, which initially is surprising to us because we think feelings are these powerful things we have at the level of the body, and we almost can't articulate them. So I think that this is the problem because we don't, in our culture, and more maybe are now, we don't have techniques that enable us to pay attention to the mind at the beginning of the day, do a 5-minute technique.
Mhm.
So then throughout the day, you're able to catch your thoughts before they get to the mouth, before they become physical feelings. And that's the real skill we have to learn. But our tragedy is we wait until it's too late. We wait till the feeling comes. I mean, the commonest question I get in people, like and we're discussing the emotions. Well, when I'm angry with my boyfriend, what can I do? And that's like saying when I see the war and I'm despairing, what can I do? Well, it's a bit late. It's a bit late then. We have to catch it first, and that's the thing. So really, Buddhist approach is all about learning to hear the thoughts and then, big surprise, change them. And this always sounds so shocking because if you're feeling this overwhelming emotion of despair, what are you fixing? We can't imagine we can fix anything inside. We can't fix the outside world, and it feels set in stone on the inside. But that's what we have to learn to realize is we can change our thought. Emotions are not set in stone. But I think we don't know we can, by changing our thoughts, we can become a happy person or a less suffering person. And that's all Buddha's saying. It's the same process. It's a cognitive process. It's changing your thoughts. So then what we have to look at here is the two main problems as far as Buddha's concerned are attachment and aversion. But when we look at attachment, which for the Buddha is this underlying constant voice that's continuously there and it's multifaceted, but it's the key energy, and this is what drives every single being in the universe, is this constant need for everything to be nice. And attachment is quite desperate. It can't stand things that aren't nice. And what not nice means is what I don't want. My attachment does not want to see war, does not want to see ugly things happening, does not want to see terrible suffering. So the reason we suffer isn't because of the war. It's what's so hard to see. If we can see there's this attachment wanting things to be nice. And the millisecond the unnice thing happens, such as the war, then anger, aversion arises. Now, this is the thing I think. With some people, it would become volatile anger, but for other people, it's quiet. And for that person, it builds up and becomes despair. So it's aversion, basically. And the interesting point is both of these are driven by fear. They're both driven by fear. And attachment only wants the nice things, and aversion is freaking out when the unnice thing happens. So the appropriate side, of course, we all want the war to end, and that's appropriate, totally appropriate. But attachment is when that want is mixed with this needy, and sounds so kind of, I don't know, it's difficult to hear it because we mix the reasonable wanting for the war to end, which is totally appropriate, with the attachment for the war to end. And that's the part that's very hard to see. Like I always think of an example of, like, you've got an alcoholic brother, So on the one hand, you've got the virtue, the so-called positive quality. You love your brother, which is, may my brother be happy. You have compassion for your brother. May he not suffer. They're amazing. They're our saving grace, those qualities. But what we don't notice is it's polluted by our attachment to the brother being not an alcoholic. In other words, my attachment is upset. How dare my wretched alcoholic brother upset my apple cart, upset my life? Because that's what's happening. And that's what causes the distress. Love and compassion can't cause distress. So what I do is I stick my nose into my brother's life, trying to make him, stop being an alcoholic, but it messes up my compassion. Maybe he doesn't want my advice. So it's what we have to learn to distinguish between is this unhappy, I-based, distressing attachment, neediness, and then valid love and compassion, which we can. So you have compassion for the people in the war, but the stress and the anxiety is coming from attachment. And that's hard to see, Scott, I think. But I think and this is not religion, this is just Buddhist psychology, and it's quite subtle, to learn to distinguish in our own mind between a neurotic need for something to be the way I want it and a valid, appropriate, love and compassion-based, need to make the world a better place. It's very hard to see the difference. And this is the key to success, I think.
Yeah, and it's recognizing that that kind of attachment, even if it's an attachment to the war ending, is an agitated state of
That's right.
mind,
That's
right?
right.
That it actually doesn't feel, and you can see that it doesn't. I see it in many, many of my friends around me. They're
Yes,
totally agitated all day long because
that's
they
right.
can't stand this reality, which there's a huge component of reasonableness too. But
Yes.
also, it seems like there's sometimes people don't think they deserve to be happy if people are being, bombed and killed all the way around the world. Like,
No, that's
what
a
would you
really
say?
interesting
What would
point.
you say
No,
to that kind of
I
person?
know that's
Is it really okay to be happy while other people are suffering so much?
a huge point, Scott, So when we
Yeah.
become like a political activist, or we really try to make the world a better place, we can't imagine doing that without being distressed and despair. The whole Buddhist approach is working on your mind means lessening attachment, lessening anger, lessening jealousy, lessening those conceptual stories. And the consequence of that, I'm sorry, we can't help it, is just naturally you'll be more happy. You can't possibly avoid it, because Buddha's saying the suffering is coming from the attachment and anxiety and agitation. So you get less attached and less angry and less despairing. You can't help but become more happy, but also more compassionate and loving. And you need that. If you want to be effective on the planet, you've got to be optimistic. You not even optimistic. You've got to be grounded, and you've got to have empathy for others. And those very qualities are what make you happy. So you can't avoid happiness. It's not a self-centered happiness. That's the big difference. Your mind will be more relaxed. Then you've got more space for compassion and more for you'll be the best political activist then. You'll be able to be of use to the world. I always remember Martin Luther King when I was a radical activist in the 60s and 70s. I remember Martin Luther King used to say, it's good to find fault. It's good to be angry in the sense that there is injustice and there is racism. But instead of just raving on about it, which is what anger wants to do, he said, then you say, what can I do to help? And that's compassion, and compassion is what makes you feel fulfilled. So of course we have to learn to be happy, but not self-centered happiness. It's a very different kind of happiness. It's a stability, a mental stability, which enables us to be empathetic. I think we've got to see the difference.
Mm.
What do you think?
A happy activist is a
That's right.
compassionate activist, is an
Exactly.
effective activist. So
Exactly.
many people, though, I know would still be arguing with you right now and say, "Oh, look, that didn't work. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Black rights have not been perfected in this
Yeah,
country."
detachment is the one that says, well, if I do this, then all the suffering will go away. No. I remember the Dalai Lama was asked by a journalist, he said, anger looks very good, it looks effective. And Dalai Lama said, I know what you mean, but if mainly what you're doing with your political activity is driven by anger, it won't last because it blows up and then collapses, and then you don't care. I mean, all the people I worked with in the 60s, they're just fat and old and don't care anymore. But he said, if you're driven by compassion, then you don't give up because you don't have a fantasy expectations. You don't give up. You just keep going because you don't have a choice, and you are fulfilled. So you can't help but be happy if you're working on your mind like this. And of course we deserve it. It's ridiculous to think we don't deserve it.